The Atlanta Hawks were in the middle of a home game, grinding out a win against the Pelicans. On the bench, sitting in street clothes, Trae Young watched his former teammates play without him. Then the news broke. Trae Young, the face of the Atlanta Hawks franchise for nearly 8 years, was being traded to the Washington Wizards. The deal happened so fast that Young was still on the bench when reporters started asking questions. He slapped hands with a few fans as he walked off the court for the final time as a Hawk. And just like that, one of the most dramatic chapters in Atlanta basketball history was over. But here's the thing nobody's talking about. This wasn't just a trade. This was a salary dump disguised as a fresh start, and it puts Young in one of the most interesting contract situations in the entire league. The Wizards sent C.J. McCollum and Corey Kispert to Atlanta. No draft picks, no young prospects, just two veterans whose main appeal was making the money work. And now Trae Young, a 4-time All-Star who once led his team to the Eastern Conference Finals, is heading to a franchise that's won just 10 games and sits dead last in the Eastern Conference. The wildest part? This might actually be exactly what both sides needed. Let's talk about that contract situation, because it's absolutely critical to understanding what happens next. Young is making $46 million this season. That's a massive number, but it's nothing compared to what's coming. He has a player option worth $49 million for the 2026-27 season. That deadline to decide? June 29, 2026. So Young has roughly 6 months to figure out if he wants to pick up that option and stay with the Wizards for another year, or decline it and hit free agency to chase a bigger long-term deal somewhere else. According to ESPN's Ramona Shelburne, both sides are open to discussing an extension, but it's not the top priority right now. The Wizards want to see Young healthy. They want to see him fit with their young core. They want to evaluate whether this gamble actually works before they commit long-term money to a guy who comes with serious question marks.
And Young, he's in the same boat. He requested Washington as his preferred destination, specifically because of his relationship with Wizards executive Travis Schlenk, the man who originally drafted him back in 2018 when Schlenk was running the Hawks. But Young isn't stupid. He knows he's walking into a rebuild, he knows the Wizards are terrible, and he knows that if things go sideways, he's got that player option as his insurance policy. Here's where it gets really interesting. The Wizards have no intention of rushing Young back onto the court. He's been dealing with multiple injuries this season, including a right MCL sprain that kept him out for 23 games and a quad contusion that sidelined him for the last 6 games in Atlanta. League sources told reporters that Washington's plan is to let Young rehab internally with zero pressure to return quickly. Why? Because the Wizards don't need wins this season. They're sitting at 10 wins and 26 losses. They're out of the playoff picture. And here's the kicker. They owe a top 8 protected first-round pick to the New York Knicks. If that pick falls outside the top 8, meaning if Washington somehow climbs up the standings and finishes 9th or worse in the lottery, they lose that pick. The Wizards are obsessed with keeping that pick. So what's the strategy? Keep Young out as long as possible. Let him get fully healthy while simultaneously keeping the team's win total suppressed. It's the same blueprint Toronto used last season when they traded for Brandon Ingram, who suffered an ankle injury and conveniently never played another game after arriving from New Orleans. The Wizards are playing the long game here, and Young's injuries give them the perfect cover to tank the rest of this season without anyone calling them out for it.
But let's step back and ask the obvious question. How did we even get here? How did Trae Young, one of the most exciting young guards in the league just a few years ago, become someone the Hawks were desperate to dump? The answer is complicated, but it starts with one simple fact. The Hawks got better without him. Atlanta went 2-8 in the 10 games Young played this season. Then he got hurt, and suddenly the Hawks started winning. They went 13-9 in the games he missed, playing faster, sharing the ball more, and most importantly, playing actual defense. Young has always been a defensive liability. At 6'1", he's undersized for his position. He doesn't have the lateral quickness to stay in front of quicker guards, and throughout his career, the Hawks have consistently allowed at least 2 more points per 100 possessions when he's on the court compared to when he's on the bench. That's a massive gap. For years, Atlanta accepted those defensive shortcomings because Young's offensive brilliance more than made up for it. He led the league in assists last season with over 11 per game. He's one of only 5 players to rank in the top 10 in both points and assists since entering the league.
The others? Nikola Jokic, Luka Doncic, James Harden, and Devin Booker. That's elite company. But here's the problem. Young's style of play requires him to dominate the ball. He needs high usage to be effective. And when your offense is that heavily tilted toward one player, and that player is also a massive defensive liability, you end up with exactly what Atlanta has experienced. First-round playoff exits, missing the playoffs entirely, and a growing sense that maybe, just maybe, you could build something better without him. The breaking point came in the offseason leading up to this year. Young wanted a contract extension. He reportedly asked for a 4-year max deal, something that would lock him in Atlanta through his prime years. The Hawks said no. They never even came close to offering what Young and his agents wanted. Instead, Atlanta made it clear they were comfortable with Young playing out the remainder of his contract. That's a brutal message to send to someone who's been the face of your franchise since 2018. Young and his camp were not happy. Tensions grew, and by early January, it was obvious that a divorce was inevitable. So the Hawks did what they had to do. They found a team willing to take on Young's contract without demanding draft picks in return. That team was Washington, a franchise so desperate for a star that they were willing to gamble on a player most of the league had soured on. The Wizards sent out McCollum, whose $30 million expiring contract was weighing down their books, and Kispert, a solid three-point shooter on a reasonable deal. In return, they got Young, his $49 million player option, and all the baggage that comes with him. No draft compensation changed hands, which tells you everything about Young's value around the league right now. A 4-time All-Star in his 20s just got traded for spare parts. For the Hawks, this trade is about financial flexibility. By moving Young, they clear nearly $30 million in potential cap space for next summer. That puts them in position to chase bigger targets, and the name everyone keeps mentioning is Anthony Davis. The Dallas Mavericks star has been linked to Atlanta for weeks, and now that the Hawks don't have to worry about Young's massive contract clogging up their books, they can actually afford to make a serious run at Davis without diving into luxury tax hell. Atlanta also gets Corey Kispert, whose three-point shooting addresses a need, and CJ McCollum, a veteran leader who can mentor their young core while playing on an expiring deal. The Hawks are betting that Jalen Johnson, Dyson Daniels, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and Onyeka Okongwu represent their future.
They're betting that a more balanced, defensively focused roster can compete better than one built entirely around Trae Young's offensive brilliance. It's a gamble, but it's one Atlanta felt they had to make. They already own the Pelicans' first-round pick from a previous trade, and with New Orleans sitting near the bottom of the standings, that pick has a 15% chance of landing at number 1 overall in the draft. If the Hawks hit on that pick and land a genuine superstar, this trade will look genius in hindsight. For the Wizards, the calculation is different. They're not trying to win now. They're trying to build something sustainable for 2026 and beyond. Washington has spent the last few years accumulating young talent through the draft. Alex Sarr, Bilal Coulibaly, Kaishan George, and rookie guard Trae Johnson all have potential, but they're raw. They need structure. They need someone who can create easy shots for them while they develop their own skills. That's where Young comes in. He's not a long-term solution. He's training wheels. The Wizards believe that having a traditional point guard who can collapse defenses and generate open looks will accelerate the development of their young players. Washington ranked 27th in offensive efficiency this season and dead last a year ago. Those aren't ideal conditions for developing talent. Young gives them instant offensive firepower, even if he doesn't fix their defensive issues. And if things don't work out, the Wizards have an easy exit. Young picks up his player option next summer, plays out the 2026-27 season, and walks in free agency. Or he declines the option, and Washington either re-signs him to a team-friendly deal or lets him go with no hard feelings. Either way, the Wizards aren't locked into anything long-term. Contract dynamics here are fascinating. If Young wants to sign an extension with Washington in the coming months, he'd have to decline his $49 million player option and replace it with a new deal starting in 2026-27. That new contract could add up to 3 additional years to the current season, so he'd be looking at a 3-year extension on top of the half season he has left in 2025-26. That's a total commitment through the 2028-29 season. But here's the thing. Why would Young agree to that right now? He has no incentive to turn down $49 million guaranteed dollars before he's even played a single game for Washington.
the smarter move is to pick up that player option, lock in the money, and then evaluate the situation next summer. If he picks up the option in June, he becomes eligible to sign an extension next offseason that begins in 2027-28 and adds up to 4 new seasons to his option year. That's a much better deal structurally. It gives him more guaranteed money and more years of security. Multiple league executives believe that's exactly what Young will do. Pick up the option, play out next season, then either sign the extension or hit free agency in 2027 when he's 30 years old. It's the safest path forward, and given everything that just happened in Atlanta, Young is probably in the mood to play things safe. But there's risk here too. What if Young gets hurt again? He's already dealing with an MCL sprain that cost him nearly a month, plus residual pain from that injury. Now he's got a quad contusion on top of it. If he picks up that player option and then suffers a major injury during the 2026-27 season, his value in free agency craters. Teams aren't going to hand out massive long-term deals to a 30-year-old point guard with a history of injuries and defensive deficiencies. That's just reality. So while the player option gives Young security, it also puts pressure on him to stay healthy and perform at an all-star level if he wants to cash in one more time before his prime years are gone.
The Wizards, meanwhile, are banking on Young using this opportunity as motivation. They're hoping he sees this trade as a chance to prove everyone wrong, to show that he can still be the focal point of a contending team, to silence the critics who say his style of play doesn't translate to winning basketball. If Young comes in and plays like the guy who averaged 28 points and 9 assists in the 2021 playoffs, Washington looks brilliant for taking this gamble. If he plays like the guy who shot 30% from 3 this season and couldn't stay healthy, they look foolish. But here's the beauty of the deal from Washington's perspective. They didn't give up anything significant. No draft picks, no young cornerstone players, just 2 veterans they weren't planning on building around anyway. The downside is minimal. The league has noticed how this trade went down, and it's sending shockwaves through front offices around the NBA. If a 4-time All-Star in his 20s can't generate a single first-round pick in return, what does that say about the trade market for other star players? Ja Morant in Memphis, LaMelo Ball in Charlotte, De'Aaron Fox in Sacramento. All of them are undersized guards with defensive limitations and massive contracts. If Trae Young couldn't get the Hawks a better return than 2 expiring deals and a role player, what leverage do those other franchises have when they eventually explore trades? The answer is not much. The NBA has shifted. Teams don't want small guards who can't defend anymore, no matter how good they are offensively. The league is faster, more physical, and more focused on switchable defenders who can guard multiple positions. Young doesn't fit that mold. He never will, and his trade value reflects that harsh reality. Some analysts are already calling this the worst trade return for an all-star in recent memory. And might be harsh, but it's not entirely wrong. The Hawks essentially gave Young away to clear cap space. That's stunning when you consider he's 27 years old and still averaging nearly 20 points and 9 assists per game. So what happens next? Young sits out the next few weeks, maybe longer, rehabbing his quad and getting acclimated to his new team. Washington takes their time, carefully managing his minutes and his health. They lose games, they keep that top 8 protected pick safe, and they evaluate whether Young can coexist with their young core. Meanwhile, the Hawks use their newfound financial flexibility to chase Anthony Davis. If they land him, this trade instantly looks smarter. If they don't, they're left with a roster full of promising young players but no true superstar to anchor things. That's a dangerous place to be in the modern NBA. You need stars to compete, and Atlanta just traded away the only one they had. But maybe, just maybe, they're betting on finding the next star through the draft. With the Pelicans' pick giving them lottery odds and their own pick likely landing in the top 10, the Hawks could end up with 2 high-level prospects this summer. If one of them hits, Young becomes a footnote in franchise history. If neither pans out, this trade goes down as one of the biggest mistakes in Hawks history. For Young, the stakes couldn't be higher. This is his chance to rewrite the narrative, to prove he's more than just empty stats on a bad team, to show he can lead a young roster and help them develop while still putting up numbers. If he succeeds, the Wizards will pay him, some other contender will pay him, he'll get his long-term extension and live happily ever after as a highly paid veteran point guard. But if he fails, if the defensive issues persist, if the injuries pile up, if Washington's young players don't develop the way everyone hopes,
then Young becomes what every athlete fears, a cautionary tale, a guy who had all the talent in the world but couldn't translate it into sustained team success, a player whose best years were defined by individual brilliance rather than championships or even consistent playoff appearances. That's the nightmare scenario, and it's closer than anyone wants to admit. Young's next 6 months will determine which version of his story gets written. Does he pick up that $49 million option and run it back for another year in Washington? Does he decline it and bet on himself in free agency? Does he sign an extension and commit to being the face of the Wizards for the next 4 or 5 years? There's one more wrinkle nobody's talking about. Young's contract includes a 15% trade kicker. That means when the trade officially processes, Young is set to receive a bonus worth 15% of his remaining salary. On a $46 million deal with a $49 million option, that bonus could be worth several $million. The Wizards are on the hook for that, and there's been no indication they're asking Young to waive it. So on top of the contract flexibility and the cap space considerations, Washington is also paying Young extra just for the privilege of trading for him. That's how desperate they were to land a star, any star, even one whose value around the league has cratered. The Wizards looked at their roster, looked at their timeline, and decided that adding Young now, even with all the baggage, was worth more than waiting another year to develop their young guys in obscurity. Time will tell if that calculation was correct, but for now, Washington is all in on Trae Young being the answer, or at least part of the answer, or at minimum, a bridge to finding the real answer down the line. The irony in all of this is almost too perfect. Trae Young and Luka Doncic were traded for each other on draft night in 2018. That trade has defined both of their careers. Luka went to Dallas and became a superstar, an MVP candidate, a guy who drags mediocre rosters to the playoffs year after year.
Young went to Atlanta and became an all-star, a stat-stuffing wizard who puts up incredible numbers but can't seem to win consistently. For years, Hawks fans defended the trade by pointing to Young's 2021 playoff run, that magical postseason where he averaged 28-9 and led Atlanta to the conference finals, knocking off the Knicks and the Sixers along the way. That was supposed to be the beginning of something special. Instead, it was the peak. The Hawks haven't been back to the conference finals since. It's barely been competitive. And now, just a few years later, Young is gone, traded to a 10-win team for spare parts. Meanwhile, Luka is still in Dallas, still dominating, still proving every single night that the Mavericks won that draft night trade by a mile. Young can't escape that comparison. It follows him everywhere. And now, heading to Washington, it's going to follow him even more, because if he can't turn around a rebuilding franchise, if he can't prove he's capable of being the centerpiece of a winning team, then the narrative becomes set in stone. Luka was always better, the Hawks made the wrong choice, and Trae Young, for all his talent, was never quite good enough to be the guy. That's brutal. That's unfair, but that's also reality. Young is walking into a situation where expectations are simultaneously sky-high and rock-bottom. The Wizards expect him to transform their offense and help their young players develop. Fans expect him to justify the trade and bring excitement back to a franchise that's been irrelevant for years. But nobody actually expects Washington to compete for a championship. Nobody thinks Young is going to lead the Wizards to the playoffs this season or even next season. The bar is set low, which should be a blessing. It should give Young room to breathe, to experiment, to find his rhythm without the pressure of immediate results. But the contract situation hangs over everything. That $49 million decision, that June 29th deadline, it's going to dominate every conversation about Young for the next 6 months. Every good game he has, people will wonder if he's playing himself into a bigger deal. Every bad game, they'll question whether he's worth keeping around at all. It's exhausting just thinking about it, and Young is the one who has to live through it. January 8, 2026, the day Trae Young became a Washington Wizard, the day his career entered a completely new phase, the day everything changed. Whether it changed for better or worse, nobody knows yet. The Wizards are betting it's for the better. They're betting Young can be the playmaker their young core needs. They're betting he'll stay healthy, perform at an all-star level, and help transform Washington from a bottom feeder into a competitive playoff contender within the next 2 years. Young is betting on himself, too. He's betting that leaving Atlanta, Leaving the tension and the failed extension talks and the constant defensive criticism will allow him to rediscover the joy that made him special in the first place. He's betting that playing for Travis Schlenk again, the executive who believed in him enough to draft him, will reignite that early career magic. And he's betting that when June 29th rolls around and he has to decide on that player option, he'll have proven enough to Washington that they'll want to keep him long-term. That's a lot of betting, a lot of variables, a lot of things that have to go right for this to work. But sometimes that's what it takes. Sometimes you need a fresh start, a new city, a new team, a new chance to prove everyone wrong. Trae Young just got his chance. What he does with it will define the rest of his career. The clock is ticking. The pressure is mounting. And somewhere in the nation's capital, the Wizards are hoping they just pulled off the steal of the decade. Or at least that they didn't mortgage their future for a player whose best days are already behind him. Only time will tell which version is true. But one thing is certain. The Trae Young era in Atlanta is over. The Trae Young era in Washington is about to begin. And nobody, not the Hawks, not the Wizards, not Young himself, knows exactly how this story ends.